Um, okay, so hello. So today we're joined by Dr. Penny Hay, who's an artist educator and research fellow at Bath Spa University. Working extensively across arts education, Penny's undertaken a number of research projects into the importance of creativity in education and community building. And as co-founder of Forest Event Imagination, which is a pop-up contemporary arts and architecture event, which is based in Bath. She's been championing creativity for all and worked with a number of partners to deliver the event, which has been happening annually since 2014. So this year they've been in collaboration with the Big Green Draw for Creativity and Wellbeing, and have delivered a virtual version of Forest of Imagination during the pandemic. They're working towards a finale event on the 10th of October this year in collaboration with TEDx Bath and TED Countdown. And that's what we're going to be sort of talking about today. So welcome, Penny.
Thank you, Debbie.
Good to see you. And so, yeah, I mean, your kind of background's quite rich in terms of a lot of the kind of charities, organisations and events and things you've kind of put together. And you've put kind of a presentation together for us to sort of share what it is that you do.
Absolutely, yes. Would you like me to share the screen?
Yeah, let's do that.
And do chip in, Debbie, as we go along. Does that look good?
Yep.
Excellent. Just get my keyboard. So yes, it's a real pleasure to be here, and I'm a big fan of Clay Hill Arts, as you know. So I thought I'd just give you a kind of a short Pecha Kucha. I've got about 20 slides just to give an example of the kind of work that I do. So I focus it around creative practice and creative learning. And I suppose on a daily basis, I co-curate experimental sites for learning. So I work half the week at the university, so I'm a research fellow, as you said, in the Centre for Cultural and Creative Industries. I'm now a reader actually in creative education. I've got to update that. And I'm essentially the rest of the week, as an artist all the time, I have to say, I'm director of research for a charity, House of Imagination, which is a charity devoted to children and young people's creativity. So we used to be called 5 by 5 for 20 years, and we decided last year to change our name because House of Imagination really says what it is on the tin. It's a studio for children and young people to work alongside creative professionals, artists of all forms and walks of life, including scientists, philosophers, environmental activists. So we have a fantastic collaborative band of people. And always looking for more people. So one of the joys of working with you, Debbie, is that we can run some professional development sessions with artists, with Clay Hill Arts. So I'm just looking at moving on. So you know my passion, this is an image from Bob and Roberta Smith, and I'm a real fan of his work. He's also an activist. So I call myself kind of an everyday activist, if you like, trying to do things differently. And I strongly believe that art is our human right, and that every child, no matter what their background or circumstance, should have access to a high quality, creative and cultural education with the arts at the heart. So that really drives my passion and drives my work. Ooh, it's gone strange. I think we've got some electricity going on here.
Yeah.
I was lucky enough to work at Tate Modern actually before it opened on the learning policy with Toby Jackson, who's the head of education then. My background is I trained in fine art and education, and then specialised in the arts in primary and secondary, mainly primary, and some time in special education. I specialised in school refusers, if you like. It's not quite the right phrase, but re-engaging young people, children, young people in their learning through the arts. And I personally believe that finding that intrinsic motivation for inquiry, self-directed inquiry, co-inquiry is really at the heart. So yes, working at Tate Modern, I moved from the Institute of Education to Goldsmiths for 7 years and worked alongside Tate Modern to set up the Artist Teacher Scheme, which is still going, and we've still got a great relationship with Tate and Tate Exchange. So we have some static going on, so I apologise for that. So yes, 5x5, when it was born 20 years ago, I moved back from London to the southwest and set up this charity. It was really a test. It was a pilot in conversation with the local education authority. The Director of Education just invited me to respond to the creative education landscape and think about what we might do differently. So 5x5 was born, and here you see 3 and 4 year olds in a local nursery school. And I think importantly, you know, the power of children's thinking is really visible here. You know, children are thinking deeply and conceptually around the kind of things that we're talking about in contemporary art practice. So on the left, the children are inviting the outside inside. How can we bring the outside inside? I got a phone call at my desk to say they need real grass, not turf, not astroturf. So you can see here one of our artists, Andy Kemp, who's also engaging with the children, teaching them different kind of photographic techniques and documenting their work. And on the right hand side, the same group of children the following term, thinking about how we can bring the idea of mapping into the conversation. And one of the children said, how big does a map have to be inside it? And actually I think that was a question from Borges. So you know, these are 3 and 4 year olds, and I suppose my point is that we mustn't underestimate children's thinking. They bring creative competences from the moment of birth. And in fact my PhD focused on the same group of children for 5 years. So I worked alongside them in a studio environment. I can't use their real names, but so for instance, here, Bo on the top left worked with me from 4 years old, and her obsession and her fascination was around pattern and landscape and pattern making. And so the charity's strapline is around the freedom to follow fascinations. You can see here, like an artist, you know, a body of work that Bo is able to then share. In fact, I've got a lovely book here that I can hide her name that I made for her, which was, you know, her beautiful book. And I think that every child deserves that kind of respectful treatment. And here, again, not his real name, but Jay, who was obsessed with monsters and mountains and really explored the possibilities of bringing those into any form of his work. So large scale, small scale, and every child kept a sketchbook, and sometimes a physical sketchbook, and often also a digital sketchbook. So they were keeping a kind of reflective commentary on their work, my phrase, not theirs, but we had conversations around being an artist and what it is to be an artist. In fact, there's a lovely, just pulling this out of my file here, but it's a lovely document here written by a 7-year-old, which I'll read out to you. And we had a conversation. So they said 5 things about being an artist: have a great imagination, then you'll have great ideas, be positive and don't worry if you make mistakes, be good at playing, be thoughtful, and art is about everything. So I keep that near me. It's actually just inside my PhD cover to remind me of the importance of children's ideas. And setting up that kind of studio environment, inviting parents and carers into the conversation, the parents as documenters. We ran workshops for the families. We had kind of special events at the school. Here on the right, artist Edwina Bridgman, who's working with the very young children in the school around the notion of shelter, finding a discarded wooden chest, and the children filling that with their imagination, and a genuine discussion around what it might mean to be homeless, what does home mean to you. So again, very serious questions, but in a playful way. And you may know about one of our signature projects, which is in collaboration with the lovely Egg Theatre in Bath, which is called School Without Walls. That's in its 10th year now. And it was born out of conversation between Kate Cross, who's in the centre, the director, with a pink skirt, and Sue East, who's the tallest person in the group. Sadly, Sue died year before last. She's a dear friend, but we've carried on her legacy, and it came out of conversation between Kate and Sue and I around, so, you know, why do we need to do school at school? Can't we just do school in the city as a campus for learning? So Kate said, well, let's just do school at the Egg. And I have to nod there to Jude Kelly at the South Bank Centre, because they'd also had a school in residence at the Lambeth School in residence at the South Bank Centre. So we were working in conversation and partnership. So here you see a Year 4-5 class who are all taking their school to the Egg every day of the week, except one, for 7 weeks during the summer term, working alongside artists, creative professionals, mentors, and co-designing the curriculum with the children, with the arts at the heart. So here, actively out in the city, dressing up as spies. I think their focus was on coordinates, and with all safeguarding in place, finding each other on the coordinates of the city, but also being in a playful way, thinking about how they can bring maths to life. And here you see the Ofsted inspector with a trench coat on. I celebrated her costume, but in fact I thought she was an actor from the Egg, but actually she was the Ofsted inspector, and they did get an outstanding, luckily. And here inside the theatre, so children exploring their ideas in 100 languages, working alongside, in this case, a theatre company, but in conversation with the artist, holding the conversation, working in the Roper Room, the studio environment at the top of the Egg, and working alongside artists, filmmakers, to really bring creativity to life and make it visible. So they're exploring their ideas in 100 languages. A phrase I use from Reggio Emilia in Italy, which has really inspired our practice. In fact, I was in Reggio earlier this year for a major conference. And on the left-hand side, the first visit to the theatre, so the beautiful, comfortable chairs, the red velvet of the chairs, and the experience of the play. And on the right-hand side, the child's reflecting on the story, working alongside Toby Thompson, who's a fantastic performance poet who works with us and the Egg in all of our work. He's amazing, look him up. And we also take the learning to the city. So here the children from St Michael's Junior School, sorry, I should have said that Sue was head teacher of St Andrew's Primary School in Bath, and we still work with them 10 years on. In fact, I was on the phone yesterday with the head teacher, Jane Rushford-Smith. And here we've got St Michael's Junior School. So one of our PGCE trainee teachers here looking out for the children in terms of making sure that they are having conversations in a very safe way with the public, but also with their parents and carers, bringing them into the environment so they can see their curation of their learning. So they took over an empty shop and turned it into their gallery of learning. And equally, in the sense, I'm so sorry about this static. It's really strange. I think I must be covered in static. Here we've got the House of Imagination popping up in all sorts of different ways. So it's a metaphor for thinking and dreaming differently alongside artists and creative professionals. We're very lucky to have Ken Robinson as our patron. You can see him there, top right, working alongside, again, one of our PGC students, Sam, and on the left, Anthony Head, Professor of Digital Animation, working on our new media wall at Bath Spa University, working alongside the children at St Andrew's Primary School in this case. And then on the left, one of my favourite times of the year is bringing the children into the art school during the degree show, and thinking about that notion that, you know, these sites for learning, so working in not only the city and all the 12 museums in Bath, but also in the art school at the different campuses of the university. And on the bottom left, a conversation with Rithington Secondary School with students all around the world from Serbia, Spain, Rwanda, talking about what is school, what is learning. And on the bottom right, we took over a gallery in Bath, the lovely 44 AD gallery. I'm sure you know it. And we papered all of the floors and walls with dotty paper, maths paper, and invited children in to play with maths with our professor, Alf Coles, who's worked with us for a long time from the University of Bristol. So it's an opportunity to really see creativity, make learning visible. And another signature project, which you may be aware of, is the Forest of Imagination. And that's now, I'm very pleased to say, in its 7th year. So the top left image, you may know Andrew Grant's brilliant work in Singapore, Gardens by the Bay. And this, because Andrew is, you know, he lives and works in Bath as well as Singapore. He's got a company in Singapore as well, an office in Singapore, sorry. But co-designing a space in the city, reimagining a space, often a familiar space. So in this case, the art school, bringing imagination and creativity into a conversation, literally his phrase, you know, let's put creativity on the pavement. And working alongside brilliant organisations like the House of Fairy Tales. So here they've designed an imagination generator, working with our PGCE students. So I always timetable my students in the city, in the museums for all of their sessions. Hopefully I'll be able to do that again in the future rather than just teaching on Zoom. And then the left-hand bottom image is our 3D design students, the idea material object students, and in fact many of them still work with us 7 years on, and they've co-designed a den for children. So Forest is not only about shining a light on the importance of global forests, but it's also about celebrating our own creativity and imagination and the importance of nature in our lives. So here Andrew's ingeniously turned a child's image of a rabbit into a fantastic pop-up rabbit that's now become a signature of the Forest of Imagination, named by Sue East actually, which is lovely, Dreamer. And here every year Toby Thompson, the brilliant poet, performs at our opening night. So I'll tell you a bit more about our next opening night soon, because you're all invited. We've taken over various spaces. So in 2016 we took over the Abbey. So we moved from the art school to Queen's Square, and then the Abbey, where really the profile around the environment, saving the baobabs and the lemurs, particularly in Madagascar. Andrew's now got a charity there with Field and Clegg Bradley Studios and Grant Associates, which is a research centre which is really important in collaboration with Bristol Zoo. So all sorts of opportunities. The image in the middle is a beautiful image by Anthony Head, who designed iMigration, which was about kind of everybody's on the move, everybody's different, everybody's welcome. And that's still an installation in the Abbey when you're allowed in. And then in 2017, we took over Bushy Norwood, the meadow next door to the University of Bath, and worked with Edge Arts Bath. We worked with the architecture students and designed 4 different houses of imagination for children and families to play in. And also we designed a walk based on Darwin's Sandwalk, really, where at each point we had a different installation and people were able to really reflect on their own creativity, the importance of nature and the notion of engagement. And then 2017, the other 3 images are right in the heart of Bath, in Kingsmead Square and by the river on Bath Quays. And we worked in collaboration with Three Ways Special School, co-designing a very inclusive, universally accessible event. It's usually a 3 or 4 day event, depending on funding and timing and so on. But the creative learning programme is all year round. And we work with about 20 schools a year. But everybody's welcome, and importantly, it's free. So it's for all ages, not just children and young people, but actually increasingly that notion of everybody being an artist. And we usually have very significant themes that we explore around, well, this year, climate emergency, but I'll come back to that. But here, Piers Taylor and Charlie Brentnell, carpenter at Woodland, designed a forest beacon. And there was all sorts of metaphors there around you know, a nod to the homeless in the city in front of the beautiful Holborn, which is one of our partner museums. We were there last year, and hopefully we'll be there again next year in 21. So this year, this is just a screenshot of our website. So I know, Debbie, you've got that ready to share in a minute. But we, given the current climate crisis and given the current pandemic, we have pivoted to a digital platform. And I've been so impressed with our artists because they have just risen to the challenge of going online. And I think the crisis has engendered real kind of creative action and hope, I think, because although it's been very challenging, what we've seen is a whole host of different creative ideas that have been shared virtually. And we are working towards, as you said in your introduction, 10-10-20, which is a collaboration with TED Countdown and TEDx Bath. So we will be, I'll tell you more about the artists who are working at the moment, but just to signpost this idea that we are responding to the climate crisis and we are thinking very carefully about how we connect with the brilliant Chris Anderson and Tom Carnac around TED Countdown, but also Jeff Rich and the TEDx curation team with TEDx Bath. So if we coalesce around the same mission, we can amplify our message. And we're also in collaboration at the moment with the Big Draw. So I'll come back to that in a minute when you share our web pages. But I just wanted to end by saying, you know, for me as an artist and an educator, researcher, I suppose that notion of everyday activism is even more important for young people, that, you know, they can save the world. It is their imagination that is so important. And I think their agency, their responsibility, and I think their voice needs to be heard. So I will do anything to support young people. We've got a call later on today, actually, with Jeff Poulin from Creative Generation in Washington about young people's leadership. And I mean, Greta, you know, what a great role model. And I suppose it brings me to my last slide, which is thinking about the idea that, you know, wherever you are in the world, I think it's really important to find that creativity within yourself to respond to some of the bigger messages that our society has to tackle. So here we're working alongside children and young people in Mumbai, so many who live in sheltered accommodation. And you may know from Slumdog Millionaire, you know, some of the scenes of Dharavi in Mumbai where waste and work and survival are just at the forefront, especially now with COVID. And feeding the families, the brilliant human rights lawyer that we're working with, director of Acorn, Vinod Shetty, he is now distributing food packages to the children, young people. We had our puppeteers locked down in the lab because of COVID, and so they were able to respond to the situation. Ben Parry, who's the MA leader in MA curatorial practice at Bath Spa, where we co-researchers on this project, so he was able to design a washing tap and send it digitally to the children, to the artist to make, etc. So lots of kind of immediate issues that need attention. And for me, the main kind of habit of mind, wherever we are, whichever part of the world, is around, I feel, you know, creativity, critical thinking, complex problem solving, compassion. I would add climate as the fifth C. So yeah, so let's go back to, if I stop screen sharing and go back to the website. We've got some new guests. Excellent.
And yeah, if I just bring the website up so we can see that there. Sure. So yeah, that's your. So we've got, yeah, on here. So this year you've obviously had to translate everything to online. How have you sort of found that in terms of managing a virtual festival that would ordinarily be in a kind of live sort of sense?
Absolutely, yeah. So I think, as I said, the crisis has really brought out everybody's creativity in all sorts of different ways, and we're very lucky. Well, two counts really. First of all, we were very fortunate as a charity to receive emergency funding from the Arts Council, so we're very grateful for that. And also, I wanted to honour the loyalty of our artists, so it was important that, although Andrew Grant and I were kind of cautious around the funding because of all of the cuts, and we had an Arts Council application in for a 2-year project, which obviously was suspended, but so we had to kind of manage that. So what we did instead was invite a feature artist each week to take the baton each week. So Jess Palmer started it during Creativity and Wellbeing Week in collaboration with the Big Draw. So the wonderful Kate Mason, who's also a trustee of our charity. We've been working together in response to mental health and wellbeing, which is so vital at the moment in all of our lives. And I think each week the narrative just exploded and expanded. So Jess passed the baton to Jo Backhouse, a writer. So she worked with Bar City Farm, virtually and physically taking some films from the animals. Then Jo passed the baton. If you scroll down, Debbie, you can see to Claire. No, that's good. No, you can go top, go along the week 3. That's good. So Claire Day, who was looking, usually Claire's a ceramic artist, but what Claire was doing was taking found artworks or discarded artworks and reworking them together into a new kind of gifted forest. So that was really beautiful. Week 4, Claire passed the baton on to Matt Lee. So he's, as I said, Matt's an ex-student who's still working with us, brilliant thinker, and he came up with the notion of kind of virtual vines. So working with the idea of on Instagram particularly, but also on Twitter, but building a virtual vine. So everybody was offering an artwork, and then he was building this collaborative patchwork quilt of vines, which was beautiful. And you can see all of these on the website.
Yeah, and so then here as well, aren't they, from each week? Is that right?
Absolutely. So each week there was a combination of films, Twitter feeds, Instagram, material on Facebook, and our website. So various blogs. So Matt passed the baton on in the 5th week to Helen. Helen's an artist, but also she's a chef and teaches at Demise Cookery School. So she focused on the edible forests and also the focus on her own garden and growing herbs and plants. So that was really playful, lovely attention to the senses, the rain and growth and the importance of nature in all of our lives. And the theme of the forest is very much around responding to climate change. And I think for me that coping with the crisis and being our university is all online teaching, nature's been so important. I couldn't do without my daily dose of going out into the fields and into the forest physically. So I feel for those people who are living in accommodation that doesn't have access to green space. I think it's even more important in all of our lives.
Yeah, and that's something you've been doing kind of through the forest as well, really, isn't it? To sort of engage with kind of communities that don't sort of normally engage with creativity, but also with the themes that you're kind of dealing with as well. It's sort of opening those conversations for them, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah, it's so important. And then just to finish on week 6 and 7, so week 6, Helen passed the baton to Alison Harper. And Alison, it's interesting conversations with Alison because she slowed everything down in a beautiful way. She self-confesses she's not tech savvy, but she did it beautifully. But what she was doing was offering wonderful quotes from John Clare, and just thinking around ideas about how we connect with our environment. She brought in different art forms, she brought in texts and music, and just that whole sense of enchantment and wonder. So for me, it was a real contemplative week. It was a slow week, and it was really lovely to see how all of the artists responded to each other's ideas. And then this last week, Alison passed the baton to Perry Harris. So if you nip over to 7. And Perry, you may know, Perry for years has offered his artwork on Twitter to us for nothing, and we felt that we wanted to give something back to him. So we gave him a spotlight week, and Perry's very playful. He made these amazing films. So one a day that he released over the week, all about, because if we had been able to meet up virtually, we designed a travelling forest around the city that was going to move from Bath City Farm on World Environment Day to Lockbrook Campus, our new art school, to Beckford's Tower, to Bath Eastern Secret Garden. And obviously the Holborn is one of our key cultural centres. So he featured a lot of those in his work, so that we still have that sense of being able to visit those centres. And then this week, just perhaps taking the baton back, because what we want to do is really think about working towards 10-10-20 now. So Jess has got a focus on in the mental health and wellbeing week, she focused more on the kind of understory work, but this week it's around kind of urban forest city. We often use the phrase landscape city, so building a forest city and showing how that we can make that visible. She's invited everybody to make these beautiful cardboard constructions, houses of imagination, whatever you want to call them, which if we were allowed to install them, we will do so in the forum if it's a physical meetup opportunity, but even so we'll be able to share that virtually. So yes, 10-10-20 is at the forum in Bath, and it will be also international and online. So, and I just wanted to give a real shout out to our partner organisations, because we do work with about 55 organisations now, at least 100 artists a year, and as I said, 20 schools, and each year for the 4 or 5 day event we get about 10,000 visitors. But now what's happened is, I mean, one of those films that Perry put out got 15,000 hits in a day, which is extraordinary. So the virtual space, and we're also being supported by Bath Digital Festival. So I think it's important that we do keep the physical and the analogue together. Yeah, very important. And I suppose that's the same for you at Clay Hill, Debbie.
Yeah, massively. I mean, you know, we're a space of learning, where, you know, and a physical space. So trying to kind of recreate that online's been quite difficult. But, you know, there are some opportunities with all of that as well. You know, I think in terms of being able to kind of reach wider audiences, have kind of bigger conversations about things. It's just all with a hope and a view that kind of 2021 is going to be the year that people can kind of come together again and start sort of sharing in physical kind of learning and sort of environments. And I know that's been a conversation we've been having for quite a while, Penny, just about, you know, what a kind of environment offers you as a kind of learner, which is something you do really well, I think, with the Forest of Imagination, in terms of opening up those sort of possibilities. And, you know, the kind of projects that you've talked about, you know, specifically kind of Schools Without Walls, I think is, you know, that's how we've been operating during lockdown. I mean, you know, people haven't been going to school. We've been, you know, don't necessarily think school in a home environment is the best place for a school, but the possibilities that's now opening up for people, I think, is really interesting.
Absolutely.
You know, putting a time frame on when that's all going to be able to, I don't think it'll ever go back, but for, yeah, when we can be in sort of physical spaces again. I mean, that's, you know, well, that's all up for debate, but
I think it's really important at the moment not to go back, and I think that, you know, the education system, I have to say, I know this is being filmed, but it's broken. And I think we need to reimagine education. You know, we need to trust teachers to have those ongoing assessments. That assessment, when it works well, is when it's really good feedback and dialogue with children and young people as ongoing learners. It's not just about a testing culture or a performance-led culture, or you know, at worst, you know, the marketisation of education. So I think this is an opportunity to really reimagine these spaces for learning. I often use the phrase learning everywhere. Learning doesn't happen just in school, but actually, you know, as Forest and School Without Walls are examples of, you know, using the city as a campus for learning. But it's finding that intrinsic motivation as a learner to be driven to learn, to want to learn, to then have that endless curiosity for possibility. So I think this is, you know, the pandemic has, we need this kind of creative disruption in a way. One of the projects I wanted to share with you was the work that we're doing with Bath Cultural Education Partnership. And that, again, out of our emergency funding, thank you very much, Arts Council South West, we have devoted 10% of our funds. So at the moment, the partners so House of Imagination, the Egg Theatre, Bath Festivals and the Holborn Museum all promised 10% of our emergency funding to support those families in Bath area, Bath North East Somerset, that have been most impacted by COVID. And so what we're doing together is an absolutely brilliant creative project, and all of the creative learning teams have come together. We've commissioned initially 2 artists, but we will have different iterations of this project because it's so exciting. And we're co-designing these beautiful creative adventure boxes. It's called Unbox at the moment, but the name will come out of the artist's own design processes. So kind of magical worlds in a box. At the moment, we've got one box co-designed with Lucy Cassidy, our School Without Walls artist, as the lead artist, and that will be, well, I can't actually tell you what it's going to be because it's secret. But watch this space, she made me promise. And the second box for older children, young people 13 plus, with James Baldwin, who has a lot of experience of working with young carers and trauma-informed work. So very important work. So at the moment we've got enough money for 250 boxes, but we'll, you know, once we've raised more funds, hopefully we'll be having different iterations of these. And also the Forest team have really risen to this challenge as well. So hopefully for between September and October, we'll be working on some projects that lead up to 10-10-20 and to align this work.
So those boxes will be ready for that time, so that they're going to be ready around that same period. So
absolutely, and importantly, our university have kindly given us match funding for, well, they will appoint a digital intern to support the project. So the boxes are analogue and digital, because we're very aware that the pandemic has really exposed this digital divide. So some children, young people, families have access to the internet and others don't. And so what we're trying to do is make it fully inclusive. So we've got kind of both on offer. And for me, I think also, you know, while I've been daily kind of surprised and delighted by the virtual Forest, I think the physical sense of making and thinking through making through different senses, and using our kind of head and our hands and our heart to really think through ideas, I think that's very important. So it will be digital and physical.
And I mean, what's sort of interesting about the Bath Cultural Education Partnership? So I know you came here to Clay Hill to sort of start ideas about what that sort of collaboration could kind of look like, and that whole process of kind of making together and thinking together was at the heart of the day that you sort of spent here. Actually, it was it's kind of responding to the kind of ways that you have been working kind of with children, and you know, opening imagination and space for kind of creative dialogue, and kind of using that model sort of for yourselves as adults, that kind of felt the right thing to be doing with that, and so it's really interesting to kind of see where that's kind of gone and where you
Well,
are.
yes, I have to say thank you then, Debbie, because that was a brilliant day. And yeah, we all hopped on the train to Bridgewater, and it was really interesting because just being in that space and to be able to work together and think differently together, and coming up with the notion of, so what could we do on behalf of the children and young people in particularly, but in Bath, North East Somerset, but everywhere, because these principles are transferable. And how can we really raise aspirations and really put high quality creative education at the fore alongside artistic excellence? And I think that's what we do well as a group. And of course, we've got a much wider network in the Bath Cultural Dialogue. But I think the creative learning is at the heart of our work in terms of, in service to children and young people in the community, especially those who are underserved, who don't have access, who are maybe more vulnerable, or in those kind of hidden communities, maybe those invisible children and young people that don't get that kind of attention. So that's where our focus is.
And that's something in terms of artists that you sort of work with, and I know you collect artists, Penny. That's your terminology, not mine. But that's the way that you work with artists as well, isn't it? To sort of support them through kind of critical learning and allowing them to sort of develop as kind of creative individuals, and I guess sort of working through kind of projects like that, it enables them to kind of think in different ways than they would normally, and sort of challenges the kind of normal way of doing things.
Yeah, that's a really important part of our work, that thinking about how we embed professional development for artists. So our artist network development, we have opportunities, and obviously, in collaboration with you, thinking about what we call RID days for reflection, exchange and dialogue, where we can really think about, a particular issue. So it might be around our habits of mind as artists. What is it that we do every day that how we can make our creativity visible? How might we use the affordances of different materials to think through ideas? Paying attention to ideas around, how do we document our work? How do we share that? Conversations that, bringing the artist's own practice alongside children in a very equal way, rather than it being an artist delivering a project to a school or a community. We don't do that. It's about co-inquiry and co-research. That's very important, that it's flat level, and that everybody's a learner and everybody's an artist.
And I suppose just a question in terms of how people kind of access sort of forests, both in a physical and a digital sense. I mean, do you gather kind of feedback, as it were, from the kind of the children that sort of take part? Is that something that then informs sort of future events, that kind of thing?
Yes, that's a very good question, and I'm glad you asked it, because absolutely, evaluation, like professional development, evaluation is integrated into every part of our work. So we work with a constant creative reflective cycle around action inquiry. So everybody, whether it's a teacher, an educator, an artist, a child, or everybody has a question to pursue through these lines of inquiry, to follow these different lines of flight, if you like. And I think that evaluation is constant, a bit like my theory around assessment being ongoing and integrated, and feedback and dialogue is really important, but also relationships. So because we don't see evaluation as a bolt-on afterwards, it's not just after the event, what did you think? It's about, constantly reflecting and weaving that into the process, so that each iteration then responds to the previous. And so we're very lucky this year with Forests of Imagination, because the wonderful Astrid Briel, the curate, she's our research fellow for impact at Bath University. So we're working together on a very playful way of integrating evaluation into the virtual forest. So it'll give an opportunity for children and families, adults, everybody to also contribute their ideas, to see how they've responded, but also a place to share their learning and their artwork. So hopefully we'll be sharing that also at 10-10-20 as a kind of almost like a case study with Bath Digital Festival as well at the end of October. So that's really important. So thank you.
Yeah, and I guess, you know, sort of through having to sort of translate it into sort of digital, and if that offers you a platform for kind of future digital dissemination, as it were, that they could, you know, the physical and the digital can then become part of future festivals, I suppose. You know, when you've kind of figured out how what works sort of effectively for everybody, which is what we're all in at the moment.
Yeah, and I think this testing out ideas process, one of my students said to me that she really loved she really loved the digital aspect of sharing ideas, because it was non-judgmental. And I think sometimes, if, you know, they're having to curate an exhibition and put it into a physical space and it's static, but having that playful digital dialogue, I think, is also very interesting. In fact, that's where we are with the work in India. We've also working on a project, hopefully will be successful, with the British Academy around digital storytelling. So the responses of young people across the world to share, not just in Mumbai, but in Calcutta and Delhi, to share with our young people here in Bath and Radstock and Bristol, and to think about their experiences of COVID and how it's affected them. I mean, we hear, you know, tragic stories of loss and grief and anxiety and stress and mental health, but we also hear stories of children really finding a voice to say what they want to say and be who they want to be. So I think it's a very interesting time. And on the good news moment, can I share some good news with you?
Please do.
Well, I hope it's good news. We don't find out till the 22nd of July. But Andrew Grant and Amy Coulthard, so Andrew and I on behalf of Forest of Imagination, and Amy Coulthard on behalf of Avon Wildlife Trust, we put in a joint proposal to Bath and North East Somerset Council to take over Entry Hill Golf Course. There's our press release and our proposal, our sketchbook, is actually on our website if you'd like to download it. And what's brilliant about this is that it will be, if we're successful, it will be, if you run down a little on the text, a nature and art discovery centre right at the heart of Bath, which brings to focus the climate and nature emergency, you know, around what we need to do next to make a difference. And I think, so Amy's Director of Conservation, you know, I mentioned Andrew earlier, and just the idea that, you know, a designated centre for nature and art and a focus on ecology, on conservation, art in the landscape. So think Yorkshire Sculpture Park, but in Bath, with all respect to Yorkshire Sculpture Park, but also bringing that conversation around wilding the landscape. You know, Bath as a landscape city, thinking about well-being through nature, and the idea of inclusion, playful spaces. And I think especially at the moment with children and young people needing that access to not only outdoor space, but also in a safe space, but also a chance to be themselves and play. I think play is at the heart of everybody's, you know, essential way of being human. I like Andrew's phrase. He talks about the relationship between humans and nature and human nature, and I think that's important, that, you know, it's not just about us as humans, it's about our relationship with nature that's so vital.
Oh, brilliant. Well, good luck.
Yes.
All the fingers and everything. we'll include the details to this in so this session's been recorded today, so that it will all be included kind of in that. So I thought if I just stop my screen share there, and so I know there's a couple of people on the call. So I didn't know if anybody had any questions here. If you don't, it's okay. But I just thought there's an opportunity if you did have any. But thank you so much, Penny, for sort of sharing all of that. It's a it's a strange but exciting time, I think, like you say, that we're all in at the moment. And I think, models of kind of what you've been doing, will obviously sort of benefit, future projects that are kind of happening. Yeah, we'll sort of watch this space, I guess.
No, thank you. And I'll keep you in touch with all of our updated projects as well. I'll just give a quick shout out to the Bristol and Bath Creative R&D project, where the House of Imagination has been invited to be an industry partner. So really exploring the idea of liveness and togetherness through expanded performance, especially now where it's increasingly we're having to really think creatively about how we do that. So yeah, I'll send you a link to that website, but that's a really exciting new project that we're working on.
Brilliant.
So thank you, Debbie. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much for being such an ambassador for our charity as well.
Oh,
and I hope that we can meet soon.
Yeah, no, and I mean, something that we have been working on together is to sort of offer, the creative professional development days. So because we feel that's important to be in a physical space. So watch this space on that one when we're all safe to do so. We'll make that kind of happen. But in the meantime, for anybody that wants to kind of get in touch, if they're interested as an artist in the kind of work that you do and wanted to sort of start a conversation, propose some ideas, how would they kind of go about doing that?
Yes, absolutely. So what we tend to do each year is to put a call out for artists to work alongside us. I mean, obviously, we also have a very loyal band who've worked with us in some cases for 20 years. But as I mentioned earlier, we are also setting up some professional development days. So maybe what would be a good idea is to have a designated event at your place, Debbie, and then we can talk about how to get involved and those kind of processes of some projects have been ongoing for a long time, but there are also new projects in the wings.
Great, sounds exciting. And maybe that could be an opportunity to test out a bit of physical and digital at the same time. We could
good idea.
The physical conversation and that sort of thing. So yeah, exciting.
Absolutely.
So just before we kind of sign off, I don't know if there are any questions from anyone that's on the call.
I can probably put a question back to your artist community, those that will be watching online later maybe, that if you have ideas for the kind of professional development that you would like. So for instance, I'm in conversation with Meadow Arts in Worcestershire. We're running a project together called Thinking Differently, which is about supporting children with neurodiverse needs. So that's one strand of work. We're doing another project with the Architecture Centre around early years understanding of space and place, so my place. So that kind of work that artists obviously, if they want more access to educational projects or community projects, and we work at various kind of levels where we're working always, as I said, with creative education and artistic excellence as our kind of banners, our USP, but we work in all sorts of contexts, so schools, community, care, environment. And I think if we are successful, for instance, with the Entry Hill site, then we'll be able to set up a designated House of Imagination, real place to have these spaces, and we could have a brilliant partnership with Clay Hill Arts. But I'm very happy to travel over to you, and it could be a really interesting question to ask the artist community.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you, Sharon.
No, thank you ever so much, Penny. It's really interesting to hear. So obviously from an education point of view, but it's really amazing to hear how you engage with everybody. So been brilliant to hear about all the projects, and I've seen lots of the things on Twitter, but really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Brilliant.
And I should mention a link, Debbie, with Plymouth College of Art and the creative education, the MA in creative education, which I helped Kim and the team co-design. I think the idea that, you know, we think differently about education now. I think artistic practice, creative practice, the link with education is so important. And for me, it goes back to that, you know, habits of mind of being an artist and living in the world creatively. So every day manifesting your creativity and your democracy.
Brilliant. Perfect way to end. Thank you, Penny.
I'll stay on the call for a quick chat, but thank you for hosting.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for coming.